Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Shadowlands live stream. I'm John Hight, executive producer for World of Warcraft. We have a lot to tell you about today, but first, I want to start by saying thank you to our amazing community. Like many of you, our regular routines have been turned upside down since we quarantined in March. We miss seeing our friends, the daily greetings, and face to face conversations that we took for granted have been replaced by webcam meetings, little windows into each other's homes. When we meet this way, we often talk about how COVID 19 and world events are affecting our team and our families. And one of the hardest parts is dealing with a feeling of helplessness. Initially, we struggled with maintaining a sense of purpose, but ultimately, we draw inspiration from all of you. In a situation where it's easy to feel isolated, our purpose is to help bring people together. WoW is truly a unique and magical place where people can maintain the bonds of friendship across physical distance by joining forces to take on epic challenges or just hang out and talk. In WoW, the journey together is the real reward. Getting an awesome loot upgrade, finally downing a mythic raid boss, defeating the enemy team in the last moments of a battle, all these experiences are memorable because we have each other to share them with. You've rekindled old friendships, made new ones, and gathered in Azeroth to honor fallen comrades. Seeing you all connect in this way has helped us carry on. WoW is also a place where you can just do your own thing, knowing that you share a common bond with millions of others who are exploring the world with you and who'll be there anytime you want to join up for an adventure or two. Like many of you, we're eager to embark on a new adventure together. You have our commitment. We will be releasing Shadowlands this fall, even if we end up shipping it from our homes. So, again, on behalf of the entire WoW team, thank you. While this stream is about Shadowlands, before I get to that, I want to remind everyone what's happening in WoW Classic. Later this month, on July 28th, WoW Classic will recreate one of the most talked about events in the game's history, the Encourage War. Players on every realm across the world will gather resources in a race to be the first to acquire the scepter of the shifting sands and open the gates of Encourage, signaling an epic war with the denizens of this ancient and deadly temple. I'm looking forward to welcoming all of our new Scarab Lords. Now, check this out. I just received our Shadowlands Collector's Edition. You can see on the spine of the box, looks like all the collector's editions you've seen before, except we have these full color Covenant emblems on the side. So it'll look great on the shelf with the other collector's editions. One of the really cool things about this box is the front cover. It's literally exploding with color. This recreates the moment when Sylvanas broke the sky above Icecrown Citadel, and you can see that cool reflective material. Inside, you have the Epic Edition, which includes the Ensorcelled Everworm mount, an Anima Wormling pet, a bunch of digital goodies, and 30 days of game time. You'll also find, and this is something we know you've all asked for, so we did one just for Shadowlands, but here's the art book. Beautiful 4-color art on every page. I'm sorry, full color art on every page, but it has all the concept art and a lot of great imagery that are unique to Shadowlands. And so you can also celebrate Shadowlands at your desk or home office. We have Shadowlands mouse pad, matches the background behind me. And then my favorite component for this is we actually have a collector's pin collection. This contains a pin for each of the covenants: Kyrian, Venthyr, Necrolords, and Night Fae. It also includes a soundtrack for Shadowlands, so you can listen to the music of the afterlife wherever you go. You'll be experiencing more of Shadowlands very soon. In fact, I'm pleased to announce World of Warcraft Shadowlands will officially enter beta next week. Beta participants will be able to experience the max level challenges in the Maw, the most dangerous place in all the Shadowlands, and one of the most rewarding too. To tell you more about our upcoming beta, I'd like to introduce our game director, Ian Hazzikostas. On behalf of the WoW team, thank you again for your support.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing your morning or evening with us, as the case may be. Super hyped to be able to share that collector's edition with everybody. One of my favorite features that John didn't get a chance to mention is that those pins actually have a self-destruct mechanism built in. So pick one carefully. If you want, the other three might vanish instantly. Let's talk a little bit about what is coming up in the beta ahead and Shadowlands in general. So first, I want to look back at the 3 months since we launched our alpha. Just about 3 months ago to this day, the alpha began, and we welcomed thousands of folks from around the world in to begin to share this great project that we've been working on really for the last couple of years. We've at this point journeyed through the 4 main zones of the Shadowlands, seen a glimpse of the Maw, experienced Covenant active abilities, and of course, seen Torghast. Our valiant alpha testers have completed over 800,000 quests in that time. Over 2,000 unique characters have finished Exile's Reach, our new player experience on the Alliance side, and ventured off to join the Alliance and go to Kultiris. Over 62,000 Torghast runs have been undertaken on our alpha servers. And alas, just over 11,000 of those ended in the clutches of the Tarragrue. So be more careful next time. And crucially, over 64,000 in-game bug reports using our in-game reporting tool have been entered by alpha testers. Our QA team internally is busy poring over those. So far, I think they've cataloged something like 1,600 unique bugs that are being tracked in our system as a result of those reports, which will be fixed, of course, by the time Shadowlands comes out. And we know that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is really, an invaluable tool, and every bit of your feedback matters. Speaking of feedback, it's not just the feedback within the tool, but also broader discussions on the forums and the community at large, on places like Reddit and Twitter, and the videos folks are making to share reactions, thoughts, and ways in which the experience that they're seeing could be improved. Something that our entire development team is eagerly attentive to. Now, our alpha experience and our alpha process really is a true alpha. For the past weeks, what you have been seeing is the active organic evolution of the game. Sometimes a build might have a change that literally is 5 days old. It's an experiment. It's a solution to some problem that was discovered, and we want to see what reactions are immediately. There's a very quick turnaround time there, and it's a collaborative process between us and the community. And so we've seen some changes to, for example, the pacing of Torghast and the removal of any sort of the torment system or time limits there. An area in Torghast we've heard a lot about, and the grim prospect of only being able to do is, frankly, just how much fun people is a week. I think we'd previously discussed that the Endless Corridor section of Torghast would be completely ungated, but I'm actually happy to announce that at this point, we are shifting to completely remove all keying from all the wings of Torghast. And so you can run it to your heart's content. If you want to go in, have fun with a buddy, try out a new build, just experience the dynamic gameplay of Torghast, we don't want to get in your way. We'll figure out a solution to the reward system there to make sure that you're not required or overly encouraged to endlessly grind it all week. But if you want to do it just because it's fun, we don't want to stop you. And of course, our class team is listening, and our combat team are listening to the feedback there, and there are regular updates coming out and many more to follow. Our level design team, which sculpts the hills and the mountains and the roads that shape our zones, are actually eagerly devouring every bit of footage of people playing the alpha they can get their hands on, often watching people who get turned around or confused or stuck trying to climb up a hill that looks like it should be climbable, and they're instantly going in, fixing those areas for the next build the next week. Every part of the game, our character artists who are looking at reactions to character customizations that are going out and hearing what people are most excited about, what they wish they could have, what options are missing, and doing what they can to add that. So I can't thank all of you enough, both the people who are in the alpha who have been testing there for us, but also those who are sharing their thoughts as part of the broader community conversation. The work that goes into Shadowlands is, as much yours as it is ours, truly. So now, turning the corner, looking ahead to what the next weeks will hold as we move into our beta. So what does beta mean? For us, beta certainly means the game's not done, but the framework is there and is complete. There shouldn't be missing pieces, giant missing ones where there's an entire feature that's not there, or there's a zone that's not yet playable. While those things are true, we continue to call it alpha. But we're getting very close to pretty much the framework all being intact, being present. And so the level cap is going to go up to 60 when beta begins. It's also going to mean a first look at our endgame systems, at truly joining a covenant, at visiting your covenant sanctum, playing through that content, playing through our outdoor world max level content, our max level dungeons, our raids, experiencing soulbinds, and more. And there's a lot of work still to be done to flesh out the details of these systems, but everything should be there, and that's why we are now calling it beta. Now, perhaps most importantly for many of you, this also means a big new invite wave going out. That's going to start next week, and a process that will continue as we also want to maintain a lot of concurrency on our test servers so we can get feedback on what zones feel like when there are dozens or hundreds of people in there competing over spawns, trying to do quests together. So make sure to go to our Battle.net account options, check your settings there, make sure that you're opted in to Warcraft beta if that interests you, and be patient. Don't get frustrated if you don't get an email from us right away. We will continue to do invites over the course of the summer. And as John said, of course, this kicks off next week. So I want to take the rest of our time together just to talk a bit about some of the things that you're going to be seeing as part of that endgame loop. Some of this is stuff that we haven't really had a chance to say much about since BlizzCon, and so I wanted to just share some more details and how the designs have evolved since we last discussed them. So first off, covenants. As we have said at great length, covenants are the centerpiece of Shadowlands, the Shadowlands expansion. This is where all roads lead. As you journey through the zones of the Shadowlands, you will play through all 4 zones. You will meet the 4 controlling powers of the Shadowlands. You get a chance to borrow their powers, get a sense of their personalities, their ethos, their aesthetic. And at the end of that road, when you hit level 60, what awaits you is this fateful choice as you return to Oribos, now fully understanding the stakes that are affecting the Shadowlands and really all of existence, and choose whether you want to cast your lot with the Kyrian of Bastion, the Venthyr of Revendreth, the Necrolords of Maldraxxus, or the Night Fae of Ardenweald. And as you make that choice, what that means is unlocking an entire sphere of gameplay and content for you. What we've seen so far in Alpha really is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just these couple of active abilities that you get to experience while leveling up. We also made sure to make those testable as early as possible just to get mechanical feedback on them and what felt good and what didn't. But now it's time to see the rest of the iceberg and everything the covenants entail. So on the system side, first off, one of the most prominent immediate things you're going to experience is soulbinds. So soulbinding is this ancient ritual in the Shadowlands whereby 2 souls can link themselves to each other, sharing a portion of their identity, of their memories, and also of their powers. And so as you join a covenant, you'll be able to form soulbinds with certain key powerful souls that are affiliated with that covenant. These will be characters with vibrant, memorable personalities, many of which you will have met while leveling up and while questing through those zones. So here, I'm going to use the Venthyr and Revendreth for a lot of these upcoming examples because that's the first covenant that we're going to have playable in an upcoming build. Nadia, the Mistblade, she was a renowned duelist in life, and that persona really shapes all of her abilities and the ways in which she's going to enhance your combat ability, grant you utility, and more. And so what each soulbind represents, as you can see in this slide, it's effectively a talent tree that you can, you will traverse down as you gain power in your covenant. You can pick which path you want to go down, customize your gameplay, customize those abilities to suit your gameplay. Now you may be noticing the empty slots in this tree. That's where you're going to put these items that are called conduits. Now, for those who played Legion, you may remember relics that you put into your artifact weapon. These are fairly similar. Conduits are going to be items that you can get from dungeon bosses, raids, PvP, a wide array of max level item sources. And unlike the soulbind traits, which are universal, where an arms warrior and a holy priest have the same traits if you have Naji as your soulbind, conduits are spec specific. They will do things like improve your ignore pain or your rejuvenation or whatever you choose to slot it. There are different conduit types. Some are going to focus on increasing your throughput, like your damage and healing. Others are more about survival. Others are about utility. Again, this is letting you mix and match to choose the gameplay and the loadout that really best suits whatever you're looking to do on a given evening in World of Warcraft. Now, unlike Covenants, which themselves are a very weighty choice and not something that's lightly switched, Soulbinds have a great deal of flexibility, both in terms of respecking them at a nominal cost, nothing escalating like how Azerite was in Battle for Azeroth, or just switching from one soulbind to another, the same way you might respec or switch talents. Truly, the idea here is to have a range of options, and you pick what suits you for what you're looking to do right now. Now, as you join the Sanctum, as you join the Covenant, a key way in which you're going to progress within your Covenant is by gaining Renown. Renown will deepen your connection with your soulbinds. It will also unlock a wide range of features, rewards, followers, which we'll talk about in a little bit, cosmetics, and more. You'll earn renown by, on a weekly basis, going out into the world, gathering anima, this precious lifeblood of the Shadowlands that every Covenant is starving for, or by going into the Maw and rescuing tormented souls that really rightfully belonged in your Covenant, in your realm, but that were instead cast into the Maw because of how the Machine of Death is broken. This isn't an open-ended grind. This isn't like artifact power. This is a more metered progression as you're working on behalf of your Covenant. And we're making sure that really from the start, the moment Shadowlands launches, we have robust catch-up systems built in, whether you are an alt, someone who's switched Covenants, or someone who's just late coming to the game. We don't want you to feel like you're behind or like you have some catch-up calendar. But Renown is a primary way in which you will progress through the systems of the Covenant, including soulbinds, but also some stuff I'm about to talk about next. So each Covenant has a sanctum. Now these are, there's loose inspiration is drawn here from things like the garrisons back in Warlords or the class halls in Legion. Each sanctum is the base of operations for that Covenant, and this is a place where you're actually likely to begin and end most of your gameplay sessions once you're at max level. Each sanctum has a number of features to it that you can upgrade, but really restore to functionality. Because I think what we're going to learn as we venture through the Shadowlands is that this was a vibrant place that had its own ecosystem and politics and people with various pastimes, but all this has been thrown into disarray as a drought plagues the land, everything is withering, starved of anima, and chaos really is consuming the Shadowlands. And you, as a champion of your Covenant, will be working to restore that order, to restore things to how they once were. And that will be largely accomplished by getting anima, rescuing souls from the Maw, and restoring, activating these structures. One of them that every Covenant has is a transportation network. So within your own zone, if you're a member of the Night Fae within Ardenweald, there's a complex route network that lets you quickly access different parts of the zone. The Venthyr and Revendreth have a network of blood mirrors that can basically teleport you around. We want to make it so that, particularly if this is something you're investing in, you feel most at home, most comfortable in your zone if you're a member of that given Covenant, because that is where your powers are greatest, that is where your Covenant's influence is greatest. Another structure that every Covenant has is something called an anima conductor. So as I've mentioned, part of the plight of the Shadowlands is this lack of anima. Groves in Ardenweald that were once flourishing with magical energy are now desiccated, withered. Temples in Bastion lie dormant, deactivated. The constructs that once guarded them are inactive. Anima is the answer to all of those things. And so what you're doing as you bring it back to your Covenant and to your Sanctum is pooling it in a reservoir, but you also have the ability to direct the flow of anima outward toward your zone to regrow, reactivate these dormant parts of the space. Now, what that means in gameplay terms is you can send a stream of anima over to an area, which will enable quests, treasures, events, outdoor world content in that area for you based on your choice on a given day. As you upgrade your anima conductor, you'll have more options that you can unlock. And as you engage in the system in general, you can progress towards permanently enabling and reactivating these spaces, both so that you have the content available for you, but also so that you see the world change around you to an extent. This grove that once was withered and dead in Ardenweald will once again be blooming and flourishing with anima energy thanks to your efforts. And the events that were there will now always be up for you as a result of what you've done. The third system that every Covenant has is a scouting map. This is an extension of the mission system that we first introduced back in Warlords of Draenor, and we've kind of tinkered with that formula a couple times since then. And I think the basic loop there, we've moved away from its central importance that it had in Warlords, and I think we're not looking to go back to the Warlords era version of this being a source of the best raid gear in the game or what have you. But it's an outlet for some storytelling, some offline progression. So you have something waiting for you where you log in and something that you can maybe check in on in shorter sessions. But we want to add more depth to the system than what we've had in the last couple of expansions. What we have previously really is just, it boils down to a coin flip. You're doing a simple matching game, matching counters to threats, and maybe you get up to 170% success chance to get your bonus reward and hope you get lucky. And really, if you didn't, there's nothing you could have done better, nothing you did right or wrong, and you either succeed or fail. We want to re-envision the foundations of that system to be something that is a better analog to the fantasy that we're trying to convey. The way a mission works in Warcraft isn't a coin flip. The way combat works in Warcraft, when you're sending these champions out into a dangerous area, isn't success or failure. It's nuanced gameplay with tanks and healers and melee DPS and range DPS as a party of combatants fight a bunch of enemies. And so this is an abstracted form of that type of combat. It still will happen while you're offline, but there's a turn-based system here where you will level up your soulbinds, recruit additional champions and adventurers to bolster their ranks, and send troops custom based on your Covenant out to complete these missions and obviously bring back some of that sweet loot that you're looking for. There's a lot of depth to the system. We're going to have a early peek at it in our next couple of builds, and we'll continue to add more breadth to it over the course of the beta. Really curious to hear initial hands-on impressions, and as always with all of our features, we want to jump in and react quickly to whatever feedback we hear. As before, adventurers will also be supported in our mobile companion app, which will be updated for Shadowlands at the time of the expansion's release. Now, those three features that I just talked about are something that every Covenant has access to. They are universal. But each Covenant also has a fourth structure that is unique depending on which Covenant you've joined. Now, I've been using Leventhyr a lot as these examples, so let's start with them. If you are a Venthyr in Revendreth, you also have this fourth section of your sanctum known as the Ember Court. Now, what the Ember Court is, it's a hosting venue for pretty rad parties. The culture of Revendreth, certainly before things really went off the rails in the events leading up to this expansion, was one of elegance, aristocracy, a lot of those tropes surrounding nobility. And part of what that means is showing off your influence by hosting grand galas for the most important individuals, not just from Revendreth, but from across the Shadowlands as a whole. And the Venthyr were notorious for this. Now, your ally, as you join the Venthyr, Prince Renethal, is looking to reestablish himself, to reestablish a new order, and showing off his growing influence and stature in that area. And you're going to help him out as a loyal member of his Covenant. And the way that's going to play out is what's effectively, a self-contained minigame where you can go out, seek out guests, invite them to the party, not maybe literally arrange catering, but figure out the different services that are going to make those guests happy, play through the party in real time, maybe fending off party crashers that are trying to disrupt festivities, and at the end of the day, maximizing the happiness of all your guests. And ideally, if they're happy, on the way out, they'll give you a token of their gratitude in the form of, sweet Warcraft loot. And to be clear, this is not gloom and doom, life or death, saving the Shadowlands stuff. This is just a fun side activity that has a remarkable amount of depth to it, but is there to allow us to flesh out the culture and the personality and the identities of these covenants, of these areas. You're not going to defeat the jailer by throwing the most badass party in the Shadowlands, but that is part of what being a Venthyr is. Now, if on the other hand, you join the Kyrian in Bastion, their unique feature is called the Path of Ascension. Now, the Path of Ascension is driven by this unique soul mirror, whereby you can actually inhabit the consciousness of one of your soulbinds. So you can play, let's say, as the aspirant Pelagos, with a unique set of abilities, and go through a series of trials, gladiatorial combat against the most powerful souls of the Shadowlands that you will also go out in your adventures across the world and recruit and capture and bring back to fight within the Path of Ascension. This is a self-contained, combat-heavy system that has a little bit of a boss rush feel to it. For those of you who are very old school, if you remember the Chartoul event way back in Burning Crusade in Blades Edge Mountains, this is loosely inspired by that. It's the same kind of vibe, and this is available to members of the Kyrian. Now, if you joined the Necrolords of Maldraxxus, Necrolords are, and Maldraxxus is the source of the military might of the Shadowlands. This is a lot of the power that we saw manifested by the Scourge in the great floating necropolises like Naxxramas, and abominations like Patchwork and ghouls and geists, and the art of creating those creatures, the art of necromancy, is most closely affiliated with Maldraxxus. And so the structure you have as a member of the Necrolords is called the Abomination Factory. And this is a system whereby you can build fleshwork creatures, essentially, whether it's an abomination or a ghoul or a geist, to be the perfect housing for a soul that's in need of a physical form. Now, these souls have quirks and unique personalities and interests and abilities. So as you meet them, figure out what the right form for them is, and create a body for them to house, you can then adventure with them, unlocking various perks ranging from utility, extra gathering bonuses, to some combat perks in the outdoor world. And again, as always, this is available to Necrolords only. And finally, if you're a member of the Night Fae of Ardenweald, Ardenweald contains in its innermost reaches a sacred grove known as the Queen's Conservatory. This is where powerful souls effectively germinate, rest, are infused with the surrounding energies of the forest, and are prepared for rebirth and return to the world of the living, because that is the essential function, one of the essential properties of Ardenweald. Now, the form that takes for you as a player, this is effectively a soul garden, and it is inspired and has some parallels to the farm back in Mists of Pandaria, where you are tending your own plots, you are expanding them, upgrading them, being able to effectively fertilize them with different catalysts that are going to shape the consciousness of these souls as you nurture them back to life. So it's a bit more magical, but at the end of the day, its own branch of self-contained gameplay. And really, one of the core ideas behind this variety of features is to reinforce the breadth of what Covenant choice is all about, and to make your experience slightly different from that of your peers as you journey through the Shadowlands, or when you're jumping on an alt and checking out a different Covenant, giving you a whole set of new fresh systems to explore and experience there. So we'll have a lot more to talk about with Sanctums. We'll have deep dive blogs on individual pieces of these over the course of the summer as beta progresses, but that's an overview of some of the new stuff that you're going to be seeing in Covenants as beta begins. Now, some other new content. We are going to have, coming up, our last dungeon that we have not yet revealed, a max level dungeon called the Theater of Pain. Theater of Pain is a dungeon in the center of Maldraxxus, and this is really, it's an epic arena, and the dungeon takes place during an important event. There's this regularly recurring battle royale, effectively, where all of the war houses of Maldraxxus send their greatest champions to fight it out, and to prove who is the strongest, who is the most powerful of all, because that's a lot of what Maldraxxus is about. It's might makes right is the prevailing ethos there, and demonstrations of power and military might and cunning. Now, this has, there are particularly complex layers to what's going on right now, given the strife that's gripping the Shadowlands, that make these particular games perhaps the most important and the weightiest in recent memory. And you find yourself as an adventurer, as a party of adventurers, plunged into this conflict. And the way that's going to play out is as a very non-linear dungeon experience as you choose which of the different factions you're going to engage with first as you traverse the catacombs and the tunnels beneath the arena, ultimately culminating in a final encounter where we'll see if you, or well, the five of you, can emerge victorious as the ultimate champions of the Theater of Pain. And as with all things Maldraxxus, the prevailing decor here is super metal, so expect more of that as you enter this dungeon. Next up, we are going to be revisiting the outdoor space of the Maw. So this is really where it all began for us in the Shadowlands. We just saw a couple of weeks ago in Alpha that initial venture into the Maw, the domain of the Jailer, as we went in from Icecrown Citadel, not knowing what was going to await us on the other side. What we found was a horrific array of forces that we can't hope to overcome. We just barely escaped from the Jailer's clutches and made it out into Oribos, where we could then explore the rest of the Shadowlands. Well, now, as we hit level 60, as we are max level, with the power of a Covenant behind us, it's going to be time for us to return to this place where it all began, to go into the Maw, with the goal of investigating, exploring, trying to understand more of what the Jailer is up to and how we might thwart those plans. So fortunately, early on in our visits into the Maw, we're going to encounter probably the one singular being in all of the Maw who doesn't actively want to kill us, at least as far as we can tell, this mysterious broker known as Venari. Venari is kind of huddled away in a small cave in the outer reaches of the Maw, and you will be able to work with her to investigate and explore, gather precious artifacts and resources from throughout the Maw that will maybe make it a little bit more of a hospitable place for you, give you more information, increase your ability to traverse the Maw, as well as improve your effectiveness in Torghast. The Maw is really inspired by a lot of our more sandboxy endgame content in the past. Most recently, probably Mechagon from the Rise of Ashara patch that we had in the middle of Battle for Azeroth. But those roots go all the way back to places like Timeless Isle. This isn't a place where you're going to bring up your map and see a bunch of world quests and clear direction. It's more about a loose structure, general broad objectives, and then lots and lots of discoverable gameplay. So we can't wait to have people jump in here, let us know what you think. And one of the really fun challenges in creating this experience was trying to create gameplay that reflects the fantasy of the space. You are not welcome here. This is not a place full of flight paths and inns to set your Hearthstone and people who are welcoming you at every turn. Everything in the Maw rejects your very existence and presence there. You do not belong here. And everything you do is under the watchful eye of the Jailer, where if you raise a bit too much of a ruckus, you are engaging in you're making a bit too much noise, fighting too many big champions, calling the attention of the Jailer upon you, you're going to need to beat a hasty retreat if you want to get out there and if you want to escape with your life and your hard-won earnings intact. So I'd like to share with you a quick video that's just a look at what the Maw is like in motion. All right, so yeah, it's like a super desolate place, but awe-inspiring in a terrible way. So those are some of the specifics that we've just covered. I also want to lay out a bit more of what lies ahead as beta unfolds across the summer. Later this month, we'll be kicking off formal raid testing of our Castle Nathria raid. This is a 10-boss raid in the zone of Revendreth, where you're ultimately going to face off against the Venthyr Lord Denathrius, who is one of the major power players in the Shadowlands. It's just incredible gothic fantasy. Our encounter team and our dungeon art team had a blast making this. We can't wait to get people in there. As always, we'll have focused testing windows for normal, heroic, mythic, and raid finder difficulties. And as we get on in the beta, we'll be looking to specifically have some targeted invites for experienced raiders who can give us the feedback that we need to get the tuning right on difficulties like Mythic. Also later this month, we'll be kicking off Shadowlands Mythic Keystone Dungeons. We want to get these in your hands as quickly as possible. As soon as max level content is unlocked, we want to enable Mythic Keystones. We'll probably have a vendor that just sells Keystones directly just to facilitate testing. Early on, we just want to get initial feedback on how our dungeons are playing with the core Mythic Plus affixes, so we can hear quickly, where things like bolstering or necrotic or bursting are extra frustrating, and make sure that we're making any tweaks early on to make the experience that you have ultimately when Shadowlands comes out the best one possible. Later on in beta, we'll also be revealing for focus testing our first Shadowlands seasonal affix, as well as some potential other tweaks to the system. Legendary rune crafting is something we're really excited to let people get their hands on. This is something we talked about way back at BlizzCon, and this is the expression of legendary items in Shadowlands. So for those of you who remember Legion, and really throughout the history of World of Warcraft, some of the coolest loot we've ever made has had that orange color, orange border. When you see a legendary item, it's usually something that's going to transform your gameplay and unlock an all new level of power within you. And one of the big points of feedback that we got that was frustrating in Legion was centered around how these items were obtained, and the lack of control over obtaining them. There might be an item that was tremendously powerful, you'd seen videos featuring it, you were really excited to get it, but there was nothing you could do to earn it, you felt, unless you got lucky. Shadowlands is really aiming from the outset to address those concerns and to give you a ton of agency and control over how you seek out and earn your legendaries. So early on, as you venture into Torghast, Tower of the Damned, you're going to encounter this mysterious runesmith who's chained up, shackled in a Hannibal Lecter-style cell in the bowels of Torghast. And what you'll learn pretty early on is that this runesmith wields some of the same power, that power of domination that was once used to craft incredible artifacts like Frostmourne or the now shattered helm of the Lich King. And by recovering essence from Torghast, as well as scraps of this ancient runic knowledge that you can bring back to the smith and awaken locked away memories, the runesmith will be able to make for you, to imbue an item with power that you get from a tailor, blacksmith, leatherworker, depending on your armor type. The runesmith can make a legendary of your choice for you. That way you can look at those amazing bracers or gloves or boots or whatever you're seeking and work towards it, earn it, and then begin your next project. A lot of these legendary powers are throwbacks to some fan favorites from across really the past dozen years, everything from Legion legendaries to old set bonuses to powers that are brand new Torghast powers that you'll be able to use temporarily within Torghast, but sometimes permanently imbue a legendary item with. Because part of the idea is really this ancient runic art is the source of many of those powers, items from the Shadowlands that have found their way out into the world over the years. And finally, they can be yours. Covenant campaigns. So I didn't touch on this when we were talking about covenants earlier, but each covenant, once you join them, has a max level narrative quest arc associated with it. This is similar to the war campaign that we had in Battle for Azeroth, where there was an alliance campaign and a horde campaign. This time around, there are 4 distinct campaigns of roughly that size and scope, depending on your covenant. And through playing through this, you will earn cosmetic rewards for your covenant, unlock an additional soulbind, and really experience the full extent of your covenant's perspective on the world and the events of the Shadowlands. Also, before too long in beta, we want to kick off some focused PvP testing. We want to set up an environment where we can unlock all of these systems. We're not trying to test the progression and the rate at which you earn them here, but we want to just let you have access to soulbinds, conduits, legendaries, all the rest, and get early and rapid iteration on arena, battlegrounds, just general PvP combat testing at max level, so that we can make sure that we're both reining in any outliers, but also just dialing in the overall pacing of combat. No one likes those matches that go into super high dampening. The other end of the spectrum, no one wants matches that are over in 20 seconds in some crazy burst or proc window. So the earlier we can get that in front of you, the earlier, sooner we can start really dialing it into what it needs to be. As part of that also, it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, we do want to test the pacing of progression and rewards and the rate at which things are earned. And to make that as organic as possible, we'll be probably wiping the existing characters that people have had in the alpha environment probably by the end of this month, and enabling character copies, which will set up end-to-end testing as you can come in with your characters from Battle for Azeroth, level up through Shadowlands, replace your gear organically, earn the rewards you're going to earn, and start giving us feedback on how all of that feels. So I think one of the things we've learned over the years in making these expansions is there's a whole lot that goes into them. There's a ton of moving parts, there's a ton of systems, and we can make our best guesses as to how players are going to interact with them. But there's no real substitute for having the whole thing stood up end to end and having people go through it. And rather than having those regrets that we sometimes have a month or two into an expansion where we realize that we missed the mark on some aspect of that progression, we want to really do as much of it as possible during beta so that when the game comes out for real, it's everything that it needs to be. And that's really the theme of the month ahead. We have some work to do to finish fleshing out the structures that we just described, but most of the rest is going to be polish, responding to feedback, iteration, and finally, tuning. I'm going to talk a little bit about tuning because I know it's a hot topic. Balance is always, the most controversial, one of the most central topics in community discussion, and has been forever in WoW. Tuning is the last thing that we do. In the early parts of alpha and beta, we're basically just looking for extreme outliers where things might be so far out of whack they disrupt the feedback that we get. If something is so overpowered that it trivializes content, well, we have to fix that. Otherwise, all of our feedback on, let's say, Torghast is going to be tainted because someone's walking through one-shotting things. Or if something is so weak that it doesn't matter if it's theoretically fun, it feels terrible to use, or no one wants to use it, we don't get feedback on it, we need to fix that. But beyond that, we really want to focus first on shoring up the conceptual foundations of what we're building. We want to make sure that the abilities, the systems, and everything else feel fun, that they sound exciting as ideas. And then once we've gotten to a place where we're confident in those foundations, the natural next step is to dial them in so that they're well tuned. And so if you're looking at the way things are in alpha now and saying to yourself that, I don't know, hypothetically speaking, the best choices are 40% better than what you might pick if you were just trying to, go after what looks fun, that's because there's a key part of the process here that just hasn't happened yet. Now, I don't want to say, just wait until after beta, it's only beta. We sometimes get that wrong too, but there's a deliberate process that we approach for a reason. Because we want to make sure that we're using the majority of our bandwidth to fix bad ideas rather than potentially trying to polish something that ultimately is fundamentally flawed. So for example, we've heard a lot of feedback recently on the Ardenweald's Paladin ability, the Covenant ability, Blessing of Seasons. And we tried a couple different versions of that. Ultimately, we're at this point going to go back to the drawing board and fundamentally redesign the way that ability works because it has some fundamental flaws that make it very challenging to balance, but also not even necessarily as fun as we'd hoped it would be. And so having put a lot of effort into tuning that would have potentially masked an underlying problem, or at best just been a distraction from the more important work that we could have been doing in the meantime. And so as the sort of original creative work of Shadowlands comes to a close, as we move out of that phase, the phase that lies ahead of us is going to have lots and lots of tuning and polish that will continue all the way up to the launch of the expansion later this year. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And I also want to thank you all for your patience. We'd originally planned on doing this stream a month ago, and back then we would have had somewhat different material. But we postponed it then to avoid distracting from a more important conversation. But of course, that conversation is still happening. Injustice doesn't cease just because we look away. Black Lives Mattered a month ago, Black Lives Matter today. And if that phrase is difficult to hear, know that I and others who speak those words aren't saying that your life has any less worth. We're only calling attention to the ways in which our societies seem to need a reminder that Black Lives Matter. Now, as John said earlier, these are extraordinarily difficult times. We all have our own struggles, and we can often help by simply listening with open hearts. So be kind to one another, stay safe, and we'll see you in Azeroth and in the Shadowlands beyond. Thank you.